protect your reproductive rights, but also...
And welcome to another edition of Let's Talk About It. This is Susan Johnson, and I'm here with my co-host Dennis O'Brien, and we have a very, very special guest today with you, Brenda Buchbinder, who is the head of the Wyndham United to Save Our Healthcare, and she has been working very hard to save healthcare here in Wyndham, particularly when you focus on maternity and delivery services that have been, removed basically from Wyndham Hospital under the auspices of Hartford Health, but also what happened back in the day when we lost our intensive care unit as well, which I helped work on, and it's created a process for us to follow. But we'll get into some detail about this amazing work that Brenda's done, and we will be able to talk a lot about the history and where we are today, right, Dennis?
Yeah, where we are today is we're on the edge of some important meetings next week, and Brenda will talk about that, and I may chime in a little bit myself. Mm-hmm. But to the extent that I know anything about what's going on now, I remember the loss of the critical care unit was a big deal, and I wrote. I think I was the first one to file a writing with the state on that one. I wrote a long letter saying that the person who was the director,
Whitehead.
Yeah, Mr. Whitehead. He had filed an affidavit giving his opinion about how we didn't need the unit. And I said basically in my letter in 3 pages that he's not qualified to give an opinion. He's not a doctor, and he was a newspaper man. And if he were to try to testify in court as an expert witness, he'd be told to leave the stand. I mean, because that, and then... unfortunately, that was, and that was opposed by, I think, every doctor who was asked.
Every doctor who
Nobody
worked.
wanted to eliminate that. And
That's right.
That led to this current problem we have today, no question.
Oh, absolutely, Dennis. It did create the current problem we have today. And I learned later on, I was fortunate enough to help create with former Lieutenant Governor Nancy Wyman the Office of Healthcare Strategy, which has been developing its work. Because before, when this occurred, the only thing we had was the Office of Healthcare Access, which was there to limit access to healthcare, not expand it or protect existing access. So the mentality of the whole Department of Public Health had to change, and that's what the Office of Healthcare Strategy did. It included the fact that when you lose valuable services like ICUs or maternity and delivery, there has to be a process. And while we have a process, we've had some difficulties with it. It's a new organization, and we're lucky we have Brenda because she's on this. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you. This is a reenactment of what happened 4.5 years ago when I first came on your show.
Uh-huh.
Thank you for having me back.
Sure.
Wow, that long ago. Huh?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
That was what we were talking
Long
about.
struggle.
What can we do about this? It's we're in shock. This was the unvaccinated year, 2020. We had no ICU and we had no vaccine, and people were struggling with food insecurity, with job insecurity, and just health insecurity. And then in June that year, we got the article in the paper saying it's closed.
Which was, really a devastating thing. And I know that there had been, they wanted to close it a couple of years before that. But the current, executive director of the local area, Donna Hanley, tried to stop it. And she had a hard time. And, of course, when you take a look at Hartford Health, it's Jeff Flack's responsibility to make sure we have access all throughout the state. And that has not been a focus of his.
I just wanted to point out to our listeners what the situation was back when the critical care unit or intensive care unit was closed. As you said, Susan, the only thing that the process was set up for was if you wanted to buy a Da Vinci robot and put it in place, you had to go and ask them. But there was nothing about them taking away any services, and that changed too late to save the critical care unit, which was tragic. But when you changed it, it made it possible to save the delivery unit, the birthing and delivery unit. But unfortunately, the damage was done, and I know that. It's been pointed out by Brenda and by the head of AFT, John Brady, who has said in writing, I've seen it, I saw it today when I was going over my notes, that, that definitely led to this tragedy. And because the doctors were concerned about not having a crisis intervention unit in the hospital where they're working and doing births, and that's part of the problem. That's one big part of the problem, that the doctors don't go there anymore.
I was at that meeting in 2015. It was at the high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Oh,
remember
yes.
testimony after testimony of people saying,
Yes.
if I didn't have this nearby, I might not have made it. There were 3,000 postcards sent in by citizens.
Right.
Medical staff after medical staff were not in agreement with it. And the issue of a doctor's liability insurance going off the chart when there's no ICU
That's right.
is not going to attract new providers. So that whole kind of cascading losses.
Well said, Brenda. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
That's perfectly said. And the other thing is that when I've been researching over the years, and first of all, of what happened and how we got the Office of Healthcare Strategy, but also I find out that this, because of my work with the National Milbank Foundation. National Milbank Foundation covers actually healthcare access all throughout the world, but mostly in the United States. And I was going to their meetings, and I found that, then we have the American Hospital Association, and I get the updates from the Milbank Foundation. The American Hospital Association writes the policy and suggests to the local, like the Connecticut Hospital Association, how they should operate a hospital. And they're a private nonprofit organization, and they have a great deal of influence. And they have been their work has been shutting down maternity and delivery services all throughout the country in rural areas. So it starts with the American Hospital Association, and then it goes to the states, and the states have been following what's been going on. And let me just say, they're teamed up with tons of lawyers that get paid very well.
Oh, they do get paid very well, no doubt about that.
We've lost over 25 community hospitals in this state alone. And there was questions of how can Wyndham Hospital continue to be open when it keeps losing services, and that's still a worry for us.
Well, that's why they said they went into Hartford Healthcare, because they were running in the red to the tune of $8 million or so when they finally decided to go in with Hartford Healthcare. It seemed to be, the only thing they could do. It was a desperate act, and unfortunately, the local hospital gave up control to Jeffrey Flax, and before that it was Elliot.
Elliot
Joseph. And
Elliot Joseph.
I'll never forget
He's
the
the
first
one that
time I
did it.
met Jeffrey Flack. I said, there's something about this guy. I just think he's all business and no health care.
Well, he's not a doctor.
Well, he's not a doctor.
And they find that the hospitals run by doctors or medical people they don't cost as much, and they do a much better job. When you just have administrators that are not medically associated or understanding how medical programs work, it's a much bigger lift in terms of whether or not they're going to be able to provide the services that we need to have for medical care. And that's what it really should be about. It should be about the medical care.
Not just the bottom line. That's what that's
Right.
what Jeffrey Flax is concerned about.
And yeah, go ahead.
Wyndham United to Save Our Healthcare started from this show, and several of us went out into the community with masks on and gloves on and distance. And did you know the maternity unit is closed? And a lot of people did not know. We had tears. We had all kinds of people coming down with their teenage children to interpret, and when they found out this was happening, we didn't hear about it. So we are now 16 groups. I'm going to go down the
please
the
do.
call
Yes,
list here.
We like that.
AFT of Connecticut, that's the American Federation of Teachers Unions. Connecticut Citizen Action Group, or CCAG. Generations Family Health Care, and we have one right in Willimantic. Hartford Organization of Professional Employees, that's the Hope Unions, in Natchog Hospital, Wyndham Hospital, and Bacchus Hospital are all organized together under the Hope Unions. The Hispanic Health Council of Hartford, Meriden, and now Wyndham. Wyndham just formed one. They're supporting this. NARAL, or Pro-Choice Connecticut, Northeast Connecticut Grassroots Group, Not Just Us, which is an equality organization. They do really good work. Planned Parenthood of Connecticut and Rhode Island. Quiet Corner Shouts, that's the northeast corner where Dave Kimball is, and they support this. let's see, the Neighbor Fund that is in stores, and that is the immigrant support network for them there. Universal Health Foundation, it's equity for health across the state. Voda Barica, WAME, Wyndham Area Interfaith Ministry, that's 40 faith communities. They just came on board.
Great.
We the People, this is for gender minorities in the state, in the community, and Wyndham Willimantic NAACP chapter, and I am currently the health chair of that.
Oh, good.
Boy, one thing I like about being on the show is I learn new things from the guests.
Yes.
And I thought, I friended somebody who I thought was a person named Hope Unions. And I thought it was just, a name for some, but I didn't realize it was an acronym.
Yes.
For that's terrific. That's now I know.
Pretty
that,
wonderful.
Yeah.
So when the nurses were
I'm
on
always
strike,
liking them, and they are loving it.
were on strike at Bacchus, many of us came from this area to stand with them.
Yeah.
And likewise, they sent people up this way when there were strikes going on here. I wanted to go over the 5 values of Hartford Healthcare and see if they apply to our loss of services. Caring, equity, excellence, integrity, and safety. We certainly value those things.
Sure. Who wouldn't?
Yep, we do.
Who in their right mind wouldn't?
We do.
Right.
We do.
Yes, we do.
I wanted to read something from our appeals. We had town councils and human rights commissions, that local areas that were supporting this. Let's see. Coventry Town Council spoke about the termination of inpatient maternity services, and that women were now placed in a position of having to deliver babies on the way to the hospital. God forbid there are complications. Let's see, Wyndham Town Council Resolution 2803 on October 6, 2020, the same year of the closure, demanded Wyndham Hospital restore all core services, especially maternity services of labor and delivery, to its original levels, and develop integrated services with a community needs assessment informed by meaningful and diverse community input. And we have been asking for 4 years for community input on this and been denied that.
I voted for that. I was on the town council.
Yeah.
Of course. Why wouldn't I vote for that?
The town of Mansfield, on April 26, 2021, the Mansfield Human Rights Commission wrote to both Jeffrey Flax and to Donna Handley and received no replies back. They addressed the human rights concerns regarding the closure of Wyndham Hospital Maternity Unit. The United States ranks last for maternal mortality among high-resource countries. Morbidity in the United States, childbearing, women of color suffer disproportionately high rates of pregnancy-related mortality and morbidity. Non-Hispanic white women experience 13 pregnancy-related deaths per 100,000 births compared to 42.8% for black women. Racial and ethnic disparities for mothers and newborns have persisted over time. The decision to close Wyndham Hospital labor and delivery services was short-sighted and has far-reaching implications for the community. We encourage you to convene a committee with the focus of addressing this issue. Again, asking for meeting with the hospital board, and no response back.
From the hospital board.
Yeah. My last quote is from Attorney General Tong. This was in July of 2022. The first decision by the Certificate of Need process and OHS was to deny the closure of the maternity unit due to a majority of health benchmarks that are public health measures were not met. Attorney General Tong today praised a proposed final decision by the Office of Health Strategy denying application from Hartford Healthcare seeking to terminate obstetric services at Wyndham Hospital. Wyndham has been designated as Connecticut's most economically distressed municipality based on population, unemployment, poverty, educational attainment, and property value. Families impacted by this permanent closure are among the most underserved in Connecticut. This is the right decision for the health and safety of mothers and babies in the Wyndham area. Asking parents to travel another 25 to 45 minutes to undergo a major medical procedure at a different hospital would have created additional burden and risk. I thank the Office of Health Strategy for carefully considering these critical factors and for this draft decision.
Well, that was a decision made by a contractor who they hired to make a recommended decision, and that person some guy who was a lawyer did a marvelous job. It was 30 pages long, and it was so well constructed. It's just, but it wasn't a final decision. It was a recommended decision, and I just thought for sure they'd follow it, and they did not.
When they denied the closure, they did not open it. So I find that interesting as well. There's been articles in the paper also about Route 32, the path from Windham to Bacchus Hospital, and particularly Franklin Hill, as the most dangerous piece of road in eastern Connecticut. And from the closure of the unit to the certificate of need hearing, there were 5 major accidents on that road. On 20/25/2020, there was 1 fatality and 2 were hospitalized. On 3/25/21, 1 fatality, killed by the ambulance, head-on collision. Again, later that month in 2021, the EMT on board was killed in the ambulance. In April of the next month, a car crash closed the road, adding another 20-25 minute detour around. And on 4/22/21, head-on crash, the driver was killed. The fact that there are very few shoulders on that road, and the ambulance has its light, and it's letting other drivers know, and they have to pull over. There's no place to pull over, and so the ambulance has to go into the other lane to go around, and that's where the accidents happen.
So it's interesting because that had never been a real focus, the Route 32 to Norwich. It always had been Suicide 6 to Hartford or Manchester. And but as we know, living here, there is no way out on a highway. Yes. We have state roads, but they're really not highways, and they're not. I mean, I had to go to a meeting yesterday afternoon in Hartford. Or maybe it was Wednesday. In any event, I'm coming back to Hartford, and I look at the traffic, and it's almost bumper to bumper all the way from Windham all the way up to Bolton. That's not rural. But we're designated rural because we don't have a highway, and that's how they have made that decision that we are rural, which also has limited the reimbursement rates for the maternity and delivery for women who have children in this area of the state.
That's part of the problem, the reimbursement rate. Because it's all, like I said, it's all about the bottom line to the people who run the HHC. And, I know the road to Norwich very well. I used to travel it many, many times when Howard Schiller would assign me to do a workers' comp case when I worked for him for a few years. I would have to dash down there and make it in half an hour to Norwich. And, wow, was it scary. And then one time there, I walked with Tony Clark and Ned Cole, who used to be very famous from Hartford. We walked the whole distance to protest the closing of the social services office here in Willimantic. And it was, it wasn't a bad walk, but I'll tell you, I was glad that when we finally got there. And the next day I slept in because it was tiring. But you're right about the road, Brenda. There's no shoulder. Right. And that is, anytime, the biggest problem with Route 6, now they've widened it, which is helpful. The biggest problem is when you have a road where people are driving fast, both ways, you really need a median, because that makes it safer. But that road is not safe. A lot of it is unlit also from above. That's right. It is not. Imagine in the winter going up those hills and down. So it is not a great situation. It's not optimum. And as you pointed out with the poverty statistics. One of the things I'm going to say when I get a chance to talk next week is I worked in legal aid for 23 years and in the probate court for 12 and spent most of my time working with the poor community in Windham, the needy community, and an awful lot of them don't have transportation. Yes. An awful lot of them. And so many of them were having problems getting up to Danielson because to go to court because they didn't have cars and there's no. This is not right. It just isn't right. And the key is we need service providers. Yes. We need service providers in some way, shape, or form. There is no question there is a need for the service. No question. We also need caring and commitment for anyone working on the healthcare needs of this area to care about this community. And we come from this group of founders who, during the Great Depression, after the
stock market crash had outgrown the hospital. That didn't stop them. There wasn't a whole lot of money around. This was still with poor people and people coming into this country. That 3,700 people from 17 towns donated $440,000 to build that hospital. Another family donated the 12.5 acres, and that was built. They've gone through some lean times, but the highest birth rate was in 1969. Nearly 800 births happened at Wyndham.
Very interesting.
Very interesting, absolutely. And when they would come up short economically, they would do trust funds, they would do fundraisers, bake sales, golf tournaments, all kinds of things to secure that hospital stay open. And the transparency and meeting with the community was part and parcel of those 87 years.
You know, and the other thing that
That's
we
what
didn't
happens when you
mention,
give up control.
that I didn't mention, is the fact that around 2015, 2016, Congressman Courtney designated our hospital, Wyndham Hospital, a Medicare hospital, which meant that the reimbursement rates went way up because we're the only Medicare hospital in the entire state. And by doing that, when you talked about the deficit of $7-8 million, the next, after the money was given and the new rates were created by Congressman Courtney, in those circumstances, we were able to actually save the hospital, and they didn't run a deficit at all. They were in the in the black rather. So we went from being in the black, in the red, to being in the black, because of the work that Congressman Joe Courtney did, making our hospital Medicare hospital. And how did that happen? Well, I'll tell you how it happened. It happened in a way because what we have here, as Brenda Buchbinder just said, we have one of the poorest towns in the entire place, one of the poorest regions in the entire state of Connecticut. And because we have such a large population of low-income people, they're on a huge proportion are on Medicare and Medicaid. Some just straight Medicaid, but some are just Medicare, and some are on both. So they're dually eligible. In any event, that is why we were able to create this Medicare hospital designation. And we'll see what happens because it's about to run out in 2025, and we'll see what Congress does with our designation now. But anyway, this is Susan Johnson. I'm here with my co-host Dennis O'Brien and our very special guest this evening, Brenda Buchbinder, who's been working so hard to make sure we have access to health care here in Wyndham. Welcome back, everyone. This is Susan Johnson. I'm here with my co-host, Dennis O'Brien, and we are here with Brenda Buchbinder, who has been creating and has created the Wyndham United to Save Our Healthcare Whoosh. And we have some more information from Brenda and some hard work that she's been doing with other groups in our communities in the region to get together and have a process that was created by the Office of Healthcare Strategy to hear from the community, from different segments of the community, about the impact that the loss of the maternity and delivery services here in town has created. And so, tell us some more about your work here.
Okay. I have been busy going to 3 New England maternal health summits since the closure. Again, I have been looking at resources. The PBS series, The Risk of Birth, is available on the internet, and it goes into last year's study of the Women's and Children's Hospital in Providence, and how the concept of having state-of-the-art providers and services and larger facilities does not necessarily slow down the rising maternal morbidity and mortality. So that was very telling for them, and they had a whole program of letting women come in and talk about what they needed. We have been asking for that for 4 years here, going on 5 years here, to talk to them about what we need here, that our sanctuary of a hospital, and we were promised enhanced services close to home. We were told that. And then all of these services became eroded away. There is a book in the reference section of the Willimantic Library. It's oversized and got lots of charts and photos in it. It is called Wyndham Hospital: A History in 1993 and going to 2003, I believe. And birth statistics, the first year in 1934, they noted 140 births and no maternal deaths. They're very proud that each of those women survived.
Yep.
They went up to the high months are 49, 59, and 1969, from 536 to 795 births at Wyndham Hospital. So when women are told here it's no longer safe to have a baby here, it's no longer safe, and it's better somewhere else because we have all these facilities, it again reminds me of what happened in Providence. Because there are large facilities and providers and all these special services, it does not necessarily calm a woman's nerves over this,
Right.
and address her experiences with implicit provider bias, which is being seen and heard. Also, institutional racism, however, it's been experienced before birth, during pregnancy, and after birth. They're talking about a fourth trimester from 7 days postpartum to 1 year of many of the problems surface then, not necessarily right after the birth. It can be delayed from gestational diabetes. It could be heart problems. It could be mental health conditions or substance abuse issues. Mental health conditions like postpartum depression, postpartum obsessive compulsive disorder, and postpartum psychosis.
And that's very interesting. And that's one of the things that I do say that in Bridgeport, there has been a program for the last year or so called the Bridge Program. And what they have done is they have been monitoring women just before they deliver, obviously during delivery, and they have full, of course, access to a complete hospital in Bridgeport, actually more than one.
More than one?
But, yes, more than
St.
one.
Vincent's
More than one.
in
More
Bridgeport.
than one.
Yep.
More than one.
Got it,
And yeah, I got it.
choice.
More
I was
than
trying
one.
to impress you.
More than more than
choice.
one. And so and the other thing is that they have done to focus a little bit more on the fact that the Bridge Program helps women before, during, and after the pregnancy, and that a lot of the difficulties are after, like Brenda just mentioned. You have the postpartum problem with diabetes. You have behavioral health issues because the hormones change dramatically from when you're pregnant into not being pregnant anymore. There's a lot of different hormonal changes that occur that really haven't been studied by the medical profession to the great degree that they should be studied. And if it was a man doing this, I think that we wouldn't be in this problem. And, I just want to say there are a lot more studies going on about how male bodies function, not very many about female bodies, because there's been a lot of concern about really how do you deal with all the hormonal changes women go through, and medical science hasn't been as good to women on those issues. And we've had study after study when you have medications monitored on men, but then they never monitor the same medication on women. And so this is something that I'm not just making up or saying. This is proven fact, and you can check it out on Google. But
Yeah, but this is all well and good, and I definitely can relate to that. But we're talking about here, for the most part, and I bet and correct me if I'm wrong, is the birthing part.
well, we are. But let me just finish because I didn't finish my remark.
Oh, okay. You're gonna bring
Yes,
it. You're gonna bring it to.
I'm going to bring it to
conclusion.
yeah. I can say. See, you're
All
on the
right.
edge. You want to know what I'm going to say next.
I do. I'm on the edge of my seat here.
So what's happened is they decided to bring this program that they started in Bridgeport that's been very successful for women after they have the baby to the northeastern Connecticut. So it's been brought to Norwich area and the Wyndham area. So women that have babies are in this whole area, and it would be interesting to match up the communities that are served by the Bridge program with the communities that are allowed to speak at our guidehouse meetings, because I think that would be another way to analyze the impact that Hartford Health has had on our maternity services and delivery services here.
They're maintaining prenatal and postnatal services,
Yes.
and the Bridge program.
Yes.
So those things are good, but the question is, and I'm sure the women being sent away, or the ones who give birth in the emergency room and then are whisked away in an ambulance,
Yeah.
why is it not safe to give birth in this hospital? What happened? This used to be a place where generations of women gave birth here. What happened all of a sudden that it's no longer safe? Is this not a large corporation that has all kinds of resources? Why would they allow this to become unsafe? And the prenatal doctor is not going to be with them at Bacchus. They're going to go from one provider to another provider who may suggest a C-section. Do they have a right to have more discussion about that? Do they have a right to understand that? Is it interpreted in a different language? It can be very frightening after that difficult ride down the road. Lifestar helicopters do not run about 6 days out of the year because of weather.
Yes.
Heavy rain, fog, heavy snow conditions, they do not take off. If you have someone who must go to Hartford Hospital to give birth, and that helicopter cannot take off, what is Plan B?
That is an excellent point, and that is something that we run into here in Wyndham, because when you take a look at the fact that you're in labor, I can't even imagine being in labor and in a helicopter. I'm sorry, it's beyond the scope of
Right.
my imagination, and or delivering the baby in the helicopter, really. And then, of course, we've seen every so often we have a horrible tragedy on Route 6, and so whether the weather is good or not, we have people who have bad collisions on Route 6, and it ties it up for hours and hours. I mean, I remember one time there was an accident there where a tree fell on, sadly, the person who was the rescue helicopter driver from Wyndham Hospital is driving home, and the tree fell on his truck, and he died, and the whole place was backed up for 12 hours or so. What happens if you're in labor and you're halfway to Hartford there, and you're backed up in that horrible tragedy with the traffic backed up for hours and hours and hours and hours? How do you make it out to get to a place where you can get around all the traffic? So it's just impossible. So this is a real problem here in this area, and it's not understood. And unfortunately, not to pick on men, I'm not picking on men.
But I think
let me just not to pick on men.
We deserve
not
it.
to pick on
Most
men.
of the time we deserve it.
Not to pick on men,
I
but not to pick on
plead
men.
guilty.
Not to pick on men. Not to pick on men, but what happens is they don't understand what it's like to be in labor and give birth.
No, we don't.
And they're making the decisions here. They're making the decisions. You don't know when the baby will actually need to be delivered, and when you're in labor, and they don't know until you get into a hospital that can make that kind of a determination. And once you're there, you should be protected. You shouldn't be sent away while you're in labor to go somewhere else. And this
I don't think it takes a genius to figure that out. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Well,
You'd rather give birth right close to home, right here in Wyndham Hospital, than
sure.
be shipped down to Norwich. That's ridiculous.
So what happens is, and my question is, and this is something that I'm hoping that we discuss when we get in the group meetings, is there's a law that was passed in the 1986 Reconciliation Act called Emergency Medical Labor and Delivery Limitations. And what the reason for that was is that women were having babies outside the hospital. They were having babies. People were injured and dying because they didn't have insurance, because they had no way of covering the cost of the health care. They would be out there having the baby on the sidewalk, or they'd be out there somewhere, injured and dying, and the hospital wouldn't take them in because they didn't have access to payment. So they passed this EMTALA law, and it's actually gone to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, hey, you got to take care of the people, the hospital. It's up to you. And so what happens when we have these circumstances where people go into Wyndham Hospital in labor? How is IMTELA not a problem for Wyndham Hospital now? Just because they do have an emergency room and they are deemed a hospital. So this is something I hope that we discuss at length when we go into our group. Why and how is IMTELA not invoked in these circumstances?
Well, I want to make sure we spend some time talking about these meetings. That
Okay,
are gonna be held
birthing
next
center
week.
focus groups are
Right.
happening next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday next week, the 4th, 5th, and 6th of February. The first group is going to be 3 groups of 10, women of childbearing age with children. Group 2, 3 groups of 10, women of childbearing age without children. Group 3, 2 groups of 10 healthcare providers, and Group 4, 2 groups of 10 community participants. We were told there would be no recordings allowed. We would not find out the location until after the registrations were completed on January 29th. No hybrid meetings, so no Zoom for people who are unable to drive here. No offer of Spanish interpreters or rides to testify. And that the results would be anonymously reported to the community and to Hartford Healthcare. No hospital officials will be in the room. I wrote to them, and I registered, and I found out actually in the second week of February that we had about 3 weeks to register everybody, and that was during holiday break. It was very hard to get the word out. And so the Chronicle covered the article that we felt rushed. If you want a robust study, you got to give us time and access to people to testify. So they gave us an extra 3 weeks. They did put a box on there saying needing accommodation, and that was for people who needed Spanish or needed handicap access. But I said, how can people who are primarily Spanish or monolingual Spanish speakers read that survey to get to that box? I said, you need the thing in Spanish. So they put the Spanish version out there, and they're now offering to provide a Spanish interpreter for all the groups, so that the Guidehouse is now doing that. I raised the question about, if the mother is at rehab or she is in a medical condition and needs to stay in the hospital when the baby comes home, who takes care of that baby? Is it the spouse? Is it an aunt, a grandparent, a sibling? And to allow them to speak, and I see they did not make any movement in that. They're just taking the person who gives birth or is of age to give birth. So I did ask for accommodation that I didn't receive.
Well, I think you've accomplished a lot, Brenda. I think, and I think they were wise to make those accommodations, because they can always be accused in a legal way of violating the terms of the agreement that was made between Hartford Healthcare and the hospital and the agency, and the state agency. It's unfortunate that the people like Whoosh or groups like Whoosh who are concerned about this didn't have a seat at the table when that agreement was signed. But that we have to live with what we have now. We can't go back. And I think
we're discovering that there's a zip code limitation on this study also.
Yeah.
From our 17 communities served by the hospital, we're now down to 8. I asked for a list of zip codes that are included, ones that are not included. I did not get that. So people are finding out when they register, gee, you're in the area, you can come, or no, you're outside the area, you can't come, even though you might work in Willimantic as a provider or have knowledge of this.
That's
or have
right.
children born here. It doesn't count. I know when I gave birth and was in the paper, there would be people from Norwich that would come up to have babies at Wyndham.
sure.
Sure. Oh, yeah. It was depends on where your doctor
We're
is.
down to the
And a lot
last
of
2
times-
minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd
Time
like you
flies.
So tell us a little bit more about the Office of Healthcare Strategy Guidehouse study, and have you got people in our groups that you listed initially who are participating?
Yes, I've signed up for Group 3, the healthcare providers, from 7 to 8 in the morning, because I'm a morning person, so I'm all
Okay.
signed up for that one.
We're in Group 4.
I am voting for a birthing center. I know it would be better to have an ICU and a maternity unit for backup. We don't have those things, but I think any measure we make to keep women from giving birth in a parking lot, in a
Yep.
vehicle,
Right.
in the emergency room, in the parking lot of Bacchus Hospital, and don't get in the door. You've given birth in the parking lot. To stop that from happening, to take the C-section rate down, to reduce that, to reduce the mental health and substance abuse risks and the medical risks. We can do something to take the maternal mortality, morbidity issues and just drop them. I'm for. I think we can lean on the history of the founders here, and we don't know how we would get the other part done because I don't think Hartford Healthcare is willing to restore the ICU and maternity units. That we would have to come up with a plan of our own.
Well, I like that idea, and that's something that I've been thinking about and talking about. And we need to, once we resolve having a place here so women don't have to go down that dangerous Route 32 or down dangerous Route 6, and they have a place where you have a skilled person who can help deliver the baby. And if there is a problem beyond that, then the emergency room should be able to deal with it because you have doctors in there and they have the resources to deal with most of those things. So we have the last 10 seconds, and we're going to let Brenda take the last 10 seconds.
Oh dear, no pressure at all.
You just say,
I'll take it.
Okay.
So I am a grandmother who has a 20-month-old granddaughter who was born in a birthing center.
All right.
So I have a first-hand story of that. They're 10 minutes away from the nearest hospital with full-service ICU and maternity. They didn't have to worry about that. But they were given the option of her being a Lavoie birth in water, and she was born in water.
Very nice.
So, yeah,
Excellent.
she just came up, floated up, and just looked around.
If anybody out there is listening who has signed up for one of these groups, please, go there and tell them exactly how you feel about this.
Let's talk
and try
about
to-
it.
try to,
Airs each
tailor
week at
your
this-
testimony to, the need for the services here and how it should be done. Thank you so much, and thank you, Brenda Buchbinder, for all your hard work and your terrific work over the years, and for organizing all of these groups. And fantastic job. We'll be back next. Maybe not next week.
I guess not, but we'll have
Maybe
a
the
great
week after.
show.
An update.
Former speaker Sarah Simowitz will be joining us, so stay tuned.
Thank you.